All right. Hey, everybody. It's November, and nothing interesting has been going on. So we're just going to talk about the Macintosh world and the Apple world. And yeah, I forgot. I'm surprised, like behind the scenes, we didn't mention Apple had an event today. Did everyone watch the Apple event?
Yeah.
Like, I only caught a piece of it. I was in meetings, unfortunately.
Well, if you say you caught a piece of it, you probably caught most of it, because in my opinion, this was my favorite Apple event ever. I think it was short and to the point, and I could digest it. It was, what was it, 45 minutes maybe for anyone who watched it end to end. It was probably 45 minutes. And for anyone who didn't watch it, they announced new Apple silicon-based Macs. And I wasn't sure how deep Apple was going to go, but I think they rocked it, man. They announced an Air, a MacBook Pro, and the Mac Mini. I'm looking around because I actually have an old one on the floor here. I was trying to remember what the hell this thing's called. And a Mini, all based on the M1 chip, the Apple Silicon. So yeah, I was really excited. I don't know. Anyone else have any thoughts on the Apple Silicon announcements?
The Pro is really surprising.
Yeah.
Just to have them announced, but then looking closer, we can't quite tell how much different it is from the Air. So maybe it's not that surprising. But,
yeah. Okay. I mean, I think the Pro announcement was a bit of a surprise, but I think they differentiated it from the Air with the graphics were going to be more powerful. The integrated graphics were more powerful. The Thunderbolt ports, the USB 3/ Thunderbolt ports, that was a differentiator, maybe? No?
No, it seems like they're all capped.
The sound was better. The mic was better, and the sound was better, and the screen was crisper.
It has a touch bar.
Integrated GPU, and it's a touch bar.
But it's less ports than the current MacBook Pro, and it's less. The Mac Mini is also reduced ports. I feel like they have some limitation that they haven't explained, and also there's no 32 gigs of RAM available.
Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. From my perspective and my way of feeling things out, like even on the Intel transition, I think I was ready to buy a new machine, and I stuck with PowerPC for that generation, which in hindsight I think kind of worked out, because PowerPC was sort of like at the peak of its performance at the time, and some of the first Intel-based Macs were a little, I don't want to say they're underpowered, but like they took off really fast. And I think we're going to see the same thing with the Apple Silicon. Like the first generation, like they're going to be great, but I can certainly wait till like another rev or two, and I think things will get beefed up. They'll iron out whatever little kinks, but I was really thrilled to see the presentation at, like, I think they went all in on what they could go all in on. Yeah, I was happy about that.
And they're shipping super fast. I think next week availability, and so yeah, it's great.
That's right. Well, which brings us to the other like little snuck in thing to that announcement, and we had to know it, that Big Sur is released on Thursday, I think they said, right?
Yep.
So we ready for Big Sur? We fending people off from upgrading?
Big Sur itself. Go ahead, Tom.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to say, I think that depends on procurement for us, right? So is Apple still going to stock and ship Catalina Macs? If not, and we're a growing company. We're hiring people all the time still. And so when it comes to the procurement process, that really dictates kind of what we have to support. Because we're not gonna go through the downgrade nonsense of get a Big Sur Mac and then try to downgrade it with Catalina, right?
Well, the other option there is you try to forecast out your hiring pipeline and you just order a ton of machines right now. That
So our reseller messaged us a few months ago, and they're like, "You better put an order in now because one of our bigger customers just ordered 40,000 Macs." And I was like, "Well, that's a lot. So maybe we should start forecasting our our onboarding and hiring process a bit better and try to get ahead of that."
Yeah. What were you going to say, Victor?
I was just going to say that for upgrading existing Intel Macs to Big Sur, it doesn't sound like there's that much to be wary of. Everything seems to be working just fine. I actually expect the spring release will probably break more things than the current release. But the real question is, can your organization support Silicon Macs as soon as they ship? And I feel like that's a difficult question without getting our hands on an actual Silicon Mac with an actual Big Sur release, because the two builds were initially separate and they unified them, and of course they all have different DTKs to test, or like enough people have them, but there's still a lot of questions around the final release. So
Yeah. I have a machine on the beta, sort of a spare machine, and I was going to open it and upgrade this morning, and I realized, like, oh yeah, there's this event today. They might release the real thing. Like, I'll just wait. And then after the announcement, I was like, I'll just leave the lid closed till Thursday and go through this just once. Cool. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I don't know how much there is to discuss. I think it was a short and sweet announcement. Yeah, I'm excited for the new hardware. I think it looks good, but I'm even more excited for the future revs of these machines. They look really exciting. And shifting over to a new architecture is, I think, to me, that's really exciting and interesting. Like, we can keep going with Intel for like forever, but I don't know. It's kind of the crappiest architecture that's out there. So I'm excited to see a new generation of chips. That's exciting from a computer science perspective. So, cool. So new face this month. I want to welcome our guest. Works for Snowflake. You may have heard of Snowflake, this big data company, helps you query and form a data lake for all of your company's data. Duo security. We love Snowflake. We use it as a front end for our internal sort of like data lake product and querying. So Tom Larkin, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so tell us all about you and how Macs fit into your life.
Sure. Guess an origin story is kind of a good place to start. I think I started out like a lot of people in IT. I graduated high school in the late 90s. I may not look it, but I'll be 40 years old next month, so I am an old timer. I went to college not wanting to do computer stuff. I actually wanted to do film and animation. But I was a computer hobbyist, so I kind of rode the 90s tech boom into a desktop support job because I wanted to make some money during college. And, those jobs paid about 12 to 15 bucks an hour. And at the time, as a college kid, that's a lot of money to make, on a part-time gig. Fast forward through college, I didn't really feel the whole arts thing or film thing, and found out the industry is pretty cutthroat and competitive, but I knew the tech stuff, so I just kept with that. About 2002, I was trying to get from desktop to like sysadmin type jobs. And at the time, I was doing Windows, Linux, and Mac because the shop I worked for did all three, right? We did desktop services for all three. And Windows was the hotness. So I went out and got a couple Microsoft certificates, but I was like one of 1,000 people applying for a job. So, I just decided to change my resume from Windows to Mac and Linux, and I was like one of 4 people applying for a job. So it really cut down the competition. I just stuck with that and, had a couple school district gigs, and then I worked for Jamf Software for about 4 years, and I did a small stint at IBM on the Mac at IBM team, and now I'm at Snowflake.
Nice. So for people who haven't heard about Snowflake, tell us a little bit about what your company does.
So I didn't even really know what Snowflake did when I applied for the job, right? I was job shopping. I have a friend that works here. He was like, "Oh, you'd be a perfect fit," and I applied, looked it up, and I'm like, "Oh, it's just a data warehouse in the cloud." Boy, was I wrong. It's really a complete data platform, and if you've worked with data tools before, like Hadoop or the Elk Stack, or Graylog, things like that, one of the problems that I think no one's solved yet is how to figure out what data to ship, right? So, like on like an Elastic Stack, you'll have like a file beat and like a log stash, and FileBeat will collect data locally and ship it to Logstash. Logstash will do this thing called Grok, which is basically regex parsing. It creates these indexes in JSON document format and stores them in basically a JSON document storage engine. And then it uses this thing called Lucene, which is like a query language. It's not well known. It's a bit esoteric in my opinion. Snowflake solves all that by kind of just saying, don't care about figuring out what to ship. Just ship everything, right? Just ship all the raw data you can, and ship it, into this giant, elastic cloud-based, highly scaled environment that is just SQL at the end of the day. Right? You can run JavaScript in there. There are some other features coming in the pipelines for things outside of SQL. We have a Python connector. So if you really want to externally use Python to query, you can. But, it takes a lot of those complexities out. Like, and also, since it's cloud-based, right, you don't have to own the infrastructure. You don't have to patch it. You don't have to track it. There really are no knobs to adjust. So when you get into like giant on-prem data warehouses or data tools like Elastic or Hadoop, you're constantly adjusting those knobs, right? You're, things like heap memory and server configs, and you're looking at all the I/O processes, and you're trying to scale it. Snowflake just does that for you. So it's like super easy to get data in there. You can ingest data many different ways. You can literally put any data you want in there. So we put a lot of IT operations and security data in there today. Looking at just my ingest, I already have a couple 100 million events that I've shipped just from my tool stack over the span of 2020. So that's a lot of events. And since storage is so cheap, you really can store just about everything. And then Snowflake does this thing where it separates compute from storage. So you can store, endless amount, because cloud storage is cheap. If you go with Amazon, Azure, or Google, cloud storage is not super expensive. And you can store tons of data in there. And then you just pay for compute. So we're really a consumption company, if you think about it, right? We're not really, we're a data platform, but we are a consumption company because you're only paying for when you consume, for the most part. The storage is a minimal kind of overhead cost. And so Snowflake is really just a data platform consumption tool, and it's hard to explain. It's hard to kind of tell someone who doesn't really know how this stuff works. And I think it took me at least 3 or 4 months of working there to wrap my head around just the basics of what we can do with Snowflake.
Yeah, that's I want to dig into that a little bit. Like, it was interesting your initial admission that, like, hey, I joined Snowflake and I didn't even really fully understand what they did or what the product was. But now that you do understand it, wow, I have a few questions on that. Like, but I guess the first question is just like, now that you do understand it, how has that shaped your thinking or your admin skills, or like, how has that informed what you can do to administer Macs or iOS devices or whatever you're responsible for at Snowflake?
Sure. So one of the lessons I learned kind of the hard way is that before I had this data tool, with your IT ops tools, whether you're using like an MDM like Jamf or Workspace ONE, or maybe your open source like Puppet or SaltStack, you have these like facts or grains or extension attributes, and you essentially run some code or a config, and you get a return, and that return is like, I guess, your source of truth. And you're like, okay, this return is now my source of truth, and I have to trust it. What I've learned is you really can't trust that, because you need to compare really multiple sources of truth. And since we're ingesting data from all of our security tools, or all of our IT tools, I actually can go into Snowflake and compare what does my local Mac client say, and what does the tenant data of my security tool say. And a lot of times I found out that they don't match. And so, all these clever little tools that I've built over the years to health check and kind of do like the extension attributes or the facts or the grains, whatever you want to call it. Some of these agents don't give you good data. Some of these agents actually lie to you. And we've built this whole remediation process where we compare data from all of our security tools and our asset tracker, like ServiceNow, right? We use ServiceNow for our asset tracker. And, sometimes a human makes a mistake and like puts a white space or fat fingers a serial number, or, they scan the wrong barcode and it adds that S at the beginning, right? And so you get a data mismatch. And so we're using these tools to find these mismatches, and we're remediating them. And I guess the end goal is one day, if we have enough time and resources, is to build some applications or tools or automation on top of that to kind of maybe take away the manual part. But right now, we are kind of in a manual remediation for some of this stuff. Other things we are able to automate. It's kind of a mixed bag.
Can you divulge what that looks like at Snowflake, with like what agents you're running, how you're shipping or collecting logs or information, facts?
Sure. So for our IT operations tools, we're using Intune for Windows 10. And currently Jamf Pro for Mac OS. My team just grew. So I used to be a one-person band. And over the past few months, we are now a 5-person team. So a lot of what I just said is going to go away next year, over the next couple of years. We're going to start building some more robust tooling, but I really can't talk about that because we're currently POCing it. So it would be kind of dumb for me to say we're going to do this, and then 4 months later I find out, well, we're changing directions. But so we have ingest from Jamf, we have ingest from Intune, we have ingest from a couple Amazon services that we're using, and then on the security side, we were using Nessus as a vuln scanner, and we're using CrowdStrike as an EDR, and we're using Code42 as kind of a insider threat model type of tool. And depending on how you get data from the tool, some tools don't really offer a data shipper. So you kind of have to build like an API ingest. Some tools will ship out events, or commonly called webhooks. We ingest those as well. And then some tools will actually have like a data replication tool that you can just dump to like an S3 bucket. So it all really depends on what the vendor or the tool supports, on how we ingest. The great thing about Snowflake is you can ingest data dozens and dozens, maybe hundreds of ways. My preferred method is to get it on S3. So whenever I build a data ingest, my goal is, how do I get it onto an S3 bucket? And then from there, I just use all the Amazon built-in nifty APIs to get it into Snowflake. So we're able to compare all that data. We're able to compare asset data from ServiceNow, so we can tell what employees have what assets. We're ingesting webhooks from Jamf, so I have a complete like fleet health dashboard where I'm like tracking check-ins, inventories, policies that are executed. Same thing with Intune. Intune data is a bit less robust. Intune is a tool that does like 3 or 4 things really well, a bunch of things mediocre, in a very mediocre fashion, and then there are things you're like, why am I paying for this? I really wish Microsoft would invest more into Intune, because I do think the few things it does well is it is done very well. And we went with Intune because of autopilot, right? We want to use autopilot. And of course, last summer, my boss is like, oh, by the way, we're getting Windows. So before we were Mac only, and I had about 5 weeks to figure out how to manage Windows devices. And to give you guys a sense of my Windows skills, the last time I heavily managed a Windows environment, we were using Novell. So it's been a long time since I really dug into the Windows ecosystem and platform. And boy, has it changed a ton. And we're getting some data from Intune. It's coming in. And then, obviously the vuln scanners and security tools come in. We even have a bit of HR data shared to us. Basically like an org chart, right? So like if you log into like your org chart at work, you can see who reports to who's an employee, who's a contractor, that type of thing. So we have that type of data shared to us in our Snowflake account. So basically I can validate, like, are you a employee, right, through the HR data? What assets do you have through ServiceNow? Are your security tools checking in through the security tool agent data? And then, is your device, being managed through our MDMs? And this is how we're approaching kind of using data to manage our fleet. And the biggest lesson I've learned is that when you start comparing multiple sources of truth, you may not get the outcome that you think you were going to get before you had that data, right? So it changes the way you approach things.
Yeah, that's a good, a lot of things you said there just sort of lined up for me. Your product, Snowflake, is a cloud-based product. I don't know about what other tools you rely on internally, but it sounds like you're really set up for a zero trust networking style or Beyond Corp style of management. Is that the case for you now?
Yep. Yeah. So we have zero on-prem. We are all in the cloud. We're a zero trust model. We have, we have Okta as our IDP. Everything has MFA. We use Duo, right? So we're MFAing with Duo and YubiKeys, or you can also MFA with the Okta Verify application if you choose to. We only hand out YubiKeys upon request, right? So if you request a YubiKey, you'll use Duo. And then we have various things behind the scenes with authentication and layers of access. And, Snowflake is all about role-based access controls, which is, RBAC is kind of the common tech term there. And so we follow that model pretty much throughout all of our tooling. So, if we were to onboard another IT person, we use things like SCIM, right? So HR data pushes to an S3 bucket. Our SCIM integration comes in and picks that data up, and we go to RDP and we provision access, we provision applications. We have automation also for offboarding. So if an employee gets termed, that same automation uses SCIM and then goes and deprovisions all the access, right? And then all that data is piped to Snowflake. And so we have, we see when we miss things. And a lot of times when we miss things, it's because someone did a last minute manual data entry change, right? And our automation didn't account for it. So then we'd have to go back to HR or the manager or whoever and kind of understand, oh, well, is this going to be the new norm, or is this what you're changing it to? And the fact that we're catching these misses and fixing them, it just makes me think of all my previous jobs where we didn't have these in place. And I'm just thinking like, man, at my previous jobs, how much of this stuff were we just missing,
Probably a lot. Yeah. I can definitely agree that like those IT systems have changed for the better so much over time. One of the things that you bring up is so critical. Just who still has access after they've left, right? After we think we've terminated their accounts.
Yeah.
Who actually still has an account somewhere, even if they never try to use it? Like, who's still provisioned? Maybe you're paying licenses for certain things. Who knows, right? Like,
yeah, exactly.
I liked your story earlier about like when you were starting out, you did Windows, Linux, Mac.
Yeah.
I definitely find people who are kind of clued into Linux or full up Unix were really ready for the change to Mac OS 10 when it came along. I don't know, did you use Classic back in the day?
I did. Yeah. So my first Mac was back when I had my first tech job. I was a Windows, PC, Linux guy. Didn't own any Macs. And my boss at the time was like, "You're going to learn Mac." And I was like, "Well, I need a Mac." And he's like, "Well, there's two beige Performas on the graveyard shelf over there. One of them has a dead logic board, and one of them has a good logic board with a ripped out ADP port." So he actually taught me how to solder. So we took the good port off the bad board, and we resoldered it onto the good board with the bad port. And he's like, "Congratulations, this is your first Mac." And it ran Mac OS 8 or 8.1, I think.
Nice.
Yeah. So, and then of course, once I got the Mac, he's like, "Congratulations, now you support Macs."
Sneaky.
Yeah.
Those are definitely interesting times. I think I was in a similar boat, like back in the day. I mean, still Windows is, I think we sometimes get blinded that our companies are very heavily Mac based, but if you sort of go out into the world, particularly financial services, things like that, like the rest of the world still runs very heavily on Windows, which was one of the statistics that Tim Cook brought up at the beginning of the event today, is that the Mac business has grown so much, and it's like, well, there's a lot of room for Mac growth in just about every business around the world, which is really interesting because, like I said, to us, before, right around that transition, at least for me, I was working at some film studios and recording studios, and yeah, they love their Macs, right? You had a little cluster of Windows machines in accounting or something like that, but very heavily Mac based, and that was always fun because they're looking for the biggest, fastest Macs to process video, and you get all these fun, like Nubus at the time, right? Like video cards and video capture cards. So that was always kind of fun. But companies like that, they, at least at the time, and this was almost like sort of like pre-internet or pre everyone being on the internet, which maybe you could then say, hey, we set up a site for our clients and IT is now a profit center, but probably not. But certainly when I was doing it, IT was not a profit center in any way, right? They kind of looked at technology as like, yeah, that's not our business, even though they're running on technology. So a lot of systems that I remember setting up around that time was like, well, I have these old Windows machines and I can get Linux for free. So I'm going to set up a bunch of Linux boxes to be, our mail servers or DNS or whatever. So,
and I did that in education, right? So when I worked in education, we lived and died by our budget. Yeah. And we had this Autodesk professor that did like Inventor and Civ and a couple of the other ones. There's an Autodesk tool called Backburner, which basically is an application that makes a pseudo software-based render farm, right? And they want to set it up, but there was no budget. So I just went to the storage facility and I was like, there goes some servers that aren't doing anything. I have no money, but hey, I can load Linux on these and I can install Samba and I can make an SMB file share to these Windows labs. And yeah, we can make this work. And so, that was like one of the first things I would always do is at the school districts, we didn't have any money and we had spare hardware, we would slap Linux on it,
Yep. Yeah. And I mean, I think the original point I was making with that was that it made your transition to OS X so much easier because you weren't scared to open a terminal or, you kind of understood that in a support article, if Apple was saying, hey, copy and paste these commands to your terminal, you weren't just doing it kind of blindly. You would kind of break it up and be like, what are they doing? Oh, here's an interesting command, or here's something different. So that was always real handy. But back to a question about Snowflake, or I guess I should probably get back to the zero trust model. So you were already set up with that, and then when the pandemic came along, you were already set up for that, or was the pandemic something that drove that?
No, we made some very smart choices ahead of time. So even before I worked at Snowflake, there's always been kind of a culture of cloud first. And, when you don't have anything on-prem, there is literally no reason to create like VPN tunnels between offices. There's no reason to set up file shares. And just so kind of naturally adopting that cloud first kind of model, we just naturally went to, a zero trust kind of setup. And then when COVID hit, nothing changed for us really, right? Everybody just went home and we're doing the same thing, right?
Yeah, largely. I definitely find that there were people that I guess they never realized they could work from home. I mean, setting aside, their home, maybe now had too many people in it or whatever, like setting aside those things, we had our very similar, right? Like everyone could work from home and it was from a purely tech standpoint, but you had developers who, were used to their 30-inch screen or whatever it is. And then they kind of get home and they're like, I have this laptop, and that frustrated some people. But there was no real tech barrier to them working from home.
Yep, I would agree.
Yeah. So one of the other things I wanted to ask from your description of Snowflake, was around. So as a cloud company, if you can say again, do you run mostly on AWS or Google or Azure or
So Snowflake is available to purchase on Amazon, Azure, and GCP. We are a multi-cloud company. I can't speak for whatever business units use because I'm not really involved in that. My team we use mostly Amazon with some Azure stuff. We want to explore GCP just to see what it offers, but we don't really have anything in GCP today. At least my team doesn't.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, I obviously I have some history with GCP and the Google Cloud stack, and when I came to Duo, they're very heavily AWS, and just it drove my brain a little nuts. And I find the documentation for AWS I've never found like really good documentation, so I'm still a little biased to the Google stack. And I find people that I know that, once they leave Duo and they have to use the Google stack, they're suddenly like, oh yeah, wow, this is so much easier or like so much more straightforward. And I've honestly, I'll admit, I don't think I've ever touched Azure. I've just flat out never looked at it.
We have some Microsoft services, right? Since we have Windows 10 devices, so we do have some servers and services, and Azure AD.
Yeah.
So we have some stuff in there, and so like the only thing we really use in my team is the Intune stack, and then we have some blob storage that we dump data into. And that I think that's the one thing I've learned about all the cloud providers is all of them provide an easy button to sort of dump logs or data into their storage offering. And so I think that, as we mature, and if we find, a great service or feature in GCP, we're probably going to use the, Google storage, because I'm sure there's an easy button that you click to dump it to storage. And then it's all about ingesting it into Snowflake. So I can't really say that I have a lot of GCP experience, but being kind of a multi-cloud company and a multi-platform company, it's kind of we definitely my team definitely wants to explore all possibilities because any three of those companies could come out with a new service or feature tomorrow that we're like, oh, that's awesome, we want to go use it, but we don't know how to use that cloud yet. Right. So I think being agile and using all three major cloud platforms is worth investing in my opinion.
Yeah. I'd agree with that approach. I mean, like we've seen some other companies, probably most notably Netflix, doing similar things where they can run on clusters on any cloud. And, what they had Chaos Monkey, and I think they've upgraded that to something else that, can do that across clouds, go kill off services randomly across clouds and make sure their service is still working, even with a complete outage from a data center. Cool. What would you say is your biggest upcoming challenge that will probably mirror other people in the Mac community?
I would say my biggest challenge is actually kind of moving away from endpoint stuff and looking at more of how to really take advantage of all the data we have. I would love to build an application, some Lambdas, some integration. We have this, amazing data platform. And, I want to invest into it. Obviously, the endpoint is still very important to my team and also to me. But, I also want to invest in leveraging our product to do really cool stuff. And I haven't really figured out the best way to do that yet. I'm still learning. So that's probably my biggest challenge is like, how do I take everything that we have and we've built and make it into, an ecosystem or a framework or whatever.
A framework that other people can use, or a framework just for within your company?
We definitely would like to open source some of this stuff someday. Right now, a lot of our stuff is too much inside baseball.
Yeah.
To really abstract to share to the public. But yeah, we definitely would love to. We have this thing called the data exchange in Snowflake, which is basically, for those of you that don't know, it's like an app store, basically, right? And so you can go to the Snowflake data exchange, and one of the vendor tools that I'm using their demo product right now. We're looking at using it more. It's called IP info, and basically you just feed it an IP address and it geolocates it. It's all built into Snowflake, and data sharing is something that I would like to explore. I just don't know how to do it. We would have to build something that, one, would appeal to the general public, and then two, people would want to use it, right? And I think that's a very, very difficult thing to figure out.
Yeah, I guess maybe I can take a few steps back to pave the way for like the next question. But how large is the company?
Like 2,500-ish people and growing.
That's all right. That's big enough that you're probably like. So the question I really want to ask is like, do you ever get involved in product or hopping on customer calls or reading reports from customers that are using your product?
Not really. IT operations. We work very closely with security, and we work very closely with the business units. So like, I am delivering a couple of internal projects and tools for the teams, but that has nothing to do with the product. It's very much more of an end user tool.
Yeah, got it.
So we don't. Yeah.
I guess my question was kind of around like, if you had any sense of if Snowflake customers were using Snowflake for the same sort of thing you are, like.
Oh, I have no idea.
Yeah, watching fleet data and sort of just analyzing their fleet and understanding their fleet, like that would be sort of an interesting product for Snowflake to offer, right? Like, hey, store all your logs and your fleet data, and we already have dashboards and analysis and things like that you can use. Anyway, that's like sprung to mind immediately because
people are doing that. I just don't know for sure. Obviously, I don't really engage with customers. And I do think it's a market we could go after if we wanted to. It's so easy to get data into Snowflake. To give you just a quick example, we use ingestion. We build our own ingest, and we use ingestion tools as well. So we try to kind of use all of the data tools in our platforms and ecosystems to kind of support just kind of the whole data business and data platforms. We use a tool called Fivetran, which has a native Snowflake connector. And for me to get webhooks ingested into Snowflake, it takes like 5 minutes, 10 minutes. And it's there. Like, it's that easy.
Do you do anything for your platforms, the Mac, I guess, particularly, that are offline? Like they're offline, so they can't be sending this data in real time. Do you queue it up locally and send it when available, or that's just data that you miss?
So the agents should delta that. Come to find out, it doesn't always work the way you think it does. We did run into an issue recently where one of our security tools, if it tries to submit data outside a scan window, it just doesn't do it. It's like you just miss it. I'm like, oh, I didn't know your tool did that. Thank you for informing me. Now I have to change how we approach it. But if you use something like a file beat, right? File beat just deltas, right? It'll keep that local index, and when it comes back online, it'll push the delta. There are many ways to do it. We actually do want to look at shipping OS query data sometime in 2021 to Snowflake. And you mentioned Fleet, and so I immediately thought of the Collide's Fleet product. I think there's a huge integration opportunity there to, kind of query your fleet and then get data returned into Snowflake. And then since Snowflake can store massive amounts of data, you can keep all your historical data there. And you can look at current data for current state, and then you can query historical data for trends and metrics and kind of grade yourself on how you're doing over time, right?
Yeah, nice. So yeah, while I've been monopolizing the conversation, anyone else have questions for Tom?
More of a comment, but I think Tom and I have had this conversation a little bit in the past, but I've been really sort of fascinated by the idea of, rather than using specialized tools that admins and security folks use for analytics, to use the tools that are available to like marketing and business analytics folks. And Snowflake is like that kind of product, and Amazon and GCP have their own. Like I've utilized BigQuery a lot for like OS query data, and it's much. I feel like there's already much better tooling available to the people who use those tools. Like I mentioned, a lot of marketing and like business intelligence use cases. And even though like we're in IT, like we're always looking at specialized tools, where I think the right approach is to, get your data where everybody else gets their data into, and use the tools that are already being built for those professionals. And I've had, there's a little bit of a different learning curve doing that, but I found that I get to getting answers quicker using that workflow. So I want to encourage everybody who's interested in that to explore any big data analytics solution.
I will definitely echo what Victor just said. Obviously I'm biased and I want you to buy Snowflake, but any data tool is better than no data tool, right? Having some sort of data tool, I think, is a must. And maybe you're using Graylog or Hadoop or Elastic. Having that it gives you so much more insights and historical context, which, I don't know about you guys, but I can't remember what happened 2 months ago. Things fly by so fast. But if I have the data, I can go back in time 2 months and look at the data and be like, oh yeah, that happened. So I completely echo your comment, and I totally agree that, even if you don't have a robust data lake where you're shipping data from every single department, even if it's just your stuff, I mean, you gotta get a data tool. I think it's very important.
My question would be, how do you take actions? Do you filter the input stream, or do you go more hunting after whatever with some queries over the historic data?
So depending on use case, most of my dashboards are operational metrics, because that's what I care about. I want to know like fleet status, fleet health, compliance status. Our security team did build an open source tool called Snow Alert. And Snow Alert is a kind of an SIEM type of query tool where you could build queries to take action on data. And Snow Alert can, PagerDuty alert you, Slack you, email you. It could run a script. It could run a Lambda. It really just depends on what you want to build. And so, yeah, the data is very actionable. It just kind of depends on the context and the use case of the data.
Yeah, but especially I think the last piece you mentioned is that's the common thing across all the toolings, even they're quite new or have some more history, is how to tailor that for the organization. So as much as it's smart to have that dashboard that gives you that overview, the moment it gets more into the detail, it gets individual, and it had to be tailored per organization. That's my finding.
Yeah, that is true, right? I mean, you can go as deep down the rabbit hole as you want to. It's all about, I guess, what you're trying to accomplish, and then how much time and effort you want to put into it. With the Python connector, you could build like a Flask app. And that Flask app could sit there and run all sorts of queries, and then it could call out to APIs. It could Slackbot people. I mean, you have to build it yourself, right? Because we don't build Flask apps at Snowflake. We just build a data platform. But that's a very hard question to answer, because I'm just going to say it depends. It just depends on what you want to do. I mean, like, for example, we have like a Snow Alert that maybe detects if someone somehow decrypts their hard drive, right? Well, maybe we spam them and say, don't do that. And we open a ticket, and, maybe we end up at some point in time doing an API call to Jamf and issuing a remote lock command through MDM, and we just lock your device. We haven't gotten there today, but all of that's doable, I really don't want to be the guy that people hate because I'm remote locking your devices when you fall out of compliance. It's not something I really want to do, but I mean, it's possible.
Well, you didn't do it. The computer did it automatically without you touching it. Yeah. I guess in that case, you need a way for people to remediate being out of compliance. So, locking is probably a little heavy-handed, but it's a good example that, like, you could automatically do all these things, which is really interesting. We very often traditionally close these meetings down by talking about upcoming events and conferences, and well, we haven't done that in a while. But it does remind me that I think, Tom, you're one of the few guests we've had that I don't think I've met in person. I don't think we've met in person.
I don't think we have either.
Yeah. What are your usual conferences or events that you attend?
So I used to go to Mac IT out here, all the Bay Area ones that are
Mac IT, man. You're going way back.
Yeah, so that, and then I went to like the MacBrained user meetups, and there were some IT think tank meetups.
Oh yeah, wow.
Yeah, so since I'm out here in the Bay Area, a lot of the meetups and conferences I go to out here. I've been to JNUC a few times.
Yep.
Didn't have travel budget for much else, so mostly stuck out here on the West Coast, where if it's didn't cost a plane ticket, I could go to it,
Yeah, maybe like, Mac Dev. When Mac DevOps comes back, it's sort of like it's a plane flight for you, but it's same time zone sort of thing. I'm definitely like missing some of these events. MacBrained is funny you bring that up, because I know, like, I remember they used to live stream some of those, so I would watch those, but I never attended an event in person. Yeah, Mac ID, man, that brings back some good memories. Getting out to San Francisco for those, and yeah, those were always good events.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was always in LA for MacTech conference when those happened.
I never made a MacTech, but I heard in one year everybody got to go watch a movie at Disney or something.
Yeah, that was a good year. That was a good year. Yeah. Neil tries to be pretty grand about some of those events, and there are always some good ones. Yeah, that year in particular was largely due to Greg Nagel, being out there and being part of Disney Animation, and so that was good. Yeah, I'm not sure if there are any events. I think last month was right after. Oh wow, a late entrance.
Hello there.
Hey Sam, how are you?
I'm good.
Yeah, we were just about to wrap up. We were just kind of talking about upcoming events, but did you join in a rush because you had a burning question for Tom Larkin?
What do you think about the new Mac Mini not being space gray?
Disappointed. I'm also disappointed they haven't made space gray AirPods yet, right? Like, why are they always white? Why can't I get some space gray ones, Apple? Come on.
Yeah, there's a note in the chat that perhaps only the Pro lineup gets space gray, so it's not a Mac Mini Pro. But yeah, people like space gray. I don't mind white AirPods. I'm just sort of waiting for the next rev to see if they get better battery life. That would be my thing that I'm looking for. Who has AirPod Pro? AirPods Pro? AirPod Pros? I don't know which way.
AirPods Pro.
AirPods Pro. Who has them? How well does the noise cancellation work?
Really well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's good to know. I don't know. I'm still trying to hold out for Rev 2 of those.
As a train commuter, right? So when we actually went into the office, I took the Caltrain every day up into San Mateo and did some online research and ended up with the Bose Quiets, right? Sound is decent. It's not the best sound I've ever heard, but the noise canceling is so good. Like, yeah. I can't hear the train tracks. I can't hear the people. I get to ride my daily train commute in peace. So
yeah, Bose is definitely top of the line for that. Sony has some good stuff too, but it's tough to compare over the ear seals and everything with just little in-ear buds. And I've heard they do great work for that. And I see Ed pointing. You're probably wearing your.
Well, no, I'm wearing my Bose 700s, but the Sony in-ear noise canceling headphones, fantastic on the New York City subway, which I think was the ultimate test of, their products, of course, are all just a string of letters, but it's whatever they are. The MX1000 M3 something in-ear ones are really good.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I've done, in the before times, taking a train into Manhattan. Yes, I would like some noise cancellation, but also, in the before times when we were getting on planes and flying, and that, I think, more than anything, why the battery life of the AirPods Pro just didn't do it for me. Like, you can't get across the country on a single charge. Like, I got to be looking for something else.
Well, the thing I like about the AirPods is they have the case that charges them, right? Like, that's really cool. honestly, Apple earbuds kind of hurt my ears, so I don't use them that much. So my other wireless earbuds that aren't noise canceling, if I'm out and about and I use them several times, they're dead. But the AirPods, you got that little case that charges them.
But on a flight, you need both of them in, and you don't have the opportunity to trade on and off to charge them up. So I would need 2 sets. What I'm doing now is I have the Beats Pro or whatever they're called that are basically AirPods of a different name. And there's a company, I'm trying to remember the name of them, but there's a company that makes different tips for them. So these seal a little bit better. So it's not noise cancellation, but it's
isolation.
It's noise isolation or whatever. And it definitely helps. So until AirPods Pro come along with the battery life, I think that's where I'm at. The Beats Pro, and they have the W1 chip like the AirPods, so they do the same sort of like switching between devices automatically and all that, which is pretty cool. But yeah, we were kind of wrapping up and talking about events. I don't know what other events are happening. I'm not sure if last month we wound up talking about Mac Sysadmin or not. Mac Sysadmin took a cue from WWDC, and instead of live sessions, he asked that speakers pre-record their sessions, and then each day just dropped the chunk of sessions that you were able to go watch on your own time or on your own terms, which I think, kind of like WDC, like it worked out so well. I didn't have to worry about sort of like, 10 a.m. there's this particular session and I have to be there. Like during a work day, I could kind of just, thread these sessions in. And I think being a little biased towards that conference and knowing the people that are usually there or speaking, like it was nice to hear those people's voices and, just sort of get a little, everyone still tried to make reference to the conference. So it was nice to hear those call outs. And then, the back channel for all of that was in Slack. So people were asking questions and discussing things in Slack. So I think it worked out really well. It was certainly my favorite kind of like virtual event or online event of the year. I think it was handled really well. But I don't think there are any others coming up that I can think of. How did JNUC handle it this year? I know they had a virtual event, but did they have...
It was pre-recorded, and then it was streamed, and you had to be in the live chat as a speaker. So there was this live interaction, but the talks have been pre-recorded.
Okay, so very similar. And did you like it? How did it work out?
It was okay.
Yeah. I know Apple did some events there, right? Like I remember seeing something from Mike Boylan that I think I saved for later to watch, which I still haven't gotten to. And I think Pepijn and Dan Flynn did a session around security. So I'd like to watch those. But what do you think I don't want to call it a failing. When you say it's okay, like what could have been better about it or what was missing besides the hallway track, besides the obvious stuff around interaction with people, what do you think was missing?
Yeah, I think it was a huge size in comparison to the other ones, Mac DevOps YVR and Mac Sysadmin. So therefore, I think that you have to account to that. And for me, it was more a personal thing. I used the wrong browser. So I was just like, I saw the live chat was going on. So during my session, but I haven't had a representation of my own session in parallel. So it was like flying by wire. It was a technical issue. If I would have used a different browser, that would have been solved.
And
this was the live aspect, to be honest, right?
Right. Yeah, Max Sysadmin, he asked that you please show up in Slack like at some point, but with the wide range of time zones, he couldn't demand that you be in Slack at any particular time. And quite frankly, that worked out okay. Like usually when I signed on in the morning, there were a few people from Japan that were like, had an hour or two, and they were kind of like, okay, we're done. And then you had the sort of the European crowd for most of the day, and then it was just, you could see it kind of the chat sort of sweep across the U.S., which was kind of interesting. So, yeah, I've definitely, I see some things in the chat around Mac DevOps, and like they had a great event, and like I've heard nothing but positive things about how Mac DevOps handled a virtual event this year. So that will make me likely to try to get in there next year.
Yeah, cool. I have not been to Gothenburg yet. It is definitely on the list of conferences I want to attend to.
Yeah, I mean, Gothenburg or not, I really enjoy it as an event. I enjoy just the vibe of the event. It's a standout to me that it's, I guess, like Mac DevOps maybe is the only other one still doing a single track event, and that gives every attendee like a big shared experience. There is a nice balance of new speakers and returning speakers, and people that, like, speakers try to build off of each other. So by the time you're at the end of the week, you have people referencing like all these sessions that happened before them in the week. So yeah, there's an interesting vibe that happens at that event that I really haven't seen at other events.
Did we lose Ed?
Looks that way.
Seems so, yeah.
We have another Ed, though.
Oh, yeah, I'm Ed +1.
Welcome back.
I don't know what happened, but fortunately we have fully redundant Eds, so it's all good. But anyway, on that note, I think unless anyone has any big announcements or news, I think we're ready to wrap up anyway.
Is everybody here ready for Big Sur to roll it out this week?
To ignore it, because everybody's ready to block Big Sur from being available to their users.
It works.
It works.
So, Sam, how long before you make everybody switch to Big Sur?
I don't know. I mean, it comes out on Thursday, so maybe like next week sometime. Give them the weekend.
Very kind.
They'll appreciate the big touchscreen style buttons.
I'm in an interesting position that I'm no longer the person managing the fleet. So I have this spare Mac, and I think there was, some announcements, like, well, don't upgrade to Big Sur yet. Don't upgrade to Big Sur. And I was like, there's a spare machine. I'll upgrade it to Big Sur. And it's been working fine, but that's my spare machine. If things go off the rails, like, I can always reinstall it. I'm not fussed about that. So far, so good.
I'm not aware of anything that doesn't work. So,
well, I think we discussed this a little bit before you hopped on, and just around like, have vendors shipped system extension versions, and what's your end user experience like, and things like that. But yeah, I agree. Like, almost everything I've tested has worked really smoothly.
Yep. My only concern is when we go back into the office, are those printers going to work? Right. Like those printers in the office are just sitting there collecting dust because no one's using them. So we'll find out when we go back.
Yeah.
Just never turn them on again.
Yeah. Someone's probably going into your office and dusting at the very least. All right. Well, thanks again, everybody. Thanks, Tom, for joining us. I really enjoyed hearing about that. And, you know, maybe we just came up with a product idea for Snowflake. I don't know.
Let's patent it.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks.
See ya.
Bye.